The stars burned cold and distant as Captain Darius Kane stood on the bridge of the Revenant, staring at the tactical screen. The enemy fleet had finally arrived. Thousands of alien warships, their dark hulls glimmering like deadly shadows, moved into position around Nova Prime, the last human colony. Humanity was out of time. Darius tightened his grip on the control panel. He had always known this day would come. The Tar Dominion, the most powerful alien empire in the galaxy, had sworn to wipe out Earth and its people. They saw humans as nothing more than pests, an unworthy species that had dared to challenge their rule. The war had raged for 15 years. Humanity fought with everything it had, but the Tar were too many, too strong. One by one, human colonies fell. Earth itself had been abandoned, its people scattered across the stars, trying to survive. Now, Nova Prime was the last stronghold. If it fell, humanity would be nothing but a forgotten memory. And Darius Kane was the only thing standing in the way. The Revenant was a prototype warship, unlike anything ever built before. It was smaller than a battleship, but faster, deadlier, and armed with weapons no enemy had ever seen. Its AI, Echo, was the most advanced tactical intelligence ever created. But it was still just one ship against an entire fleet. Darius exhaled slowly. He knew what the odds were. The Galactic Council, a union of alien civilizations, had already abandoned humanity. No reinforcements were coming. No one was coming. It was just him. A sudden transmission lit up the screen. The face of a Zeltar commander appeared, a tall reptilian creature with glowing red eyes and a cruel smirk. "Human," the commander hissed, his voice cold and mocking. "You have fought well, but this is the end. Surrender your colony, and we will grant your people a painless death." Darius smirked. "Sorry, but I'm not really in the surrendering mood today." The Zeltar commander chuckled, amused. "Foolish. One warship cannot stop an empire. You will burn." The transmission cut off. Outside, the enemy fleet began to move. Thousands of warships, all preparing to attack. Darius turned to Echo, the AI. "Looks like we're outnumbered." The AI's voice was calm, almost amused. "Correction. We are always outnumbered." Darius smiled. "Then let's make sure they regret it." The Revenant shot forward, vanishing in an instant. It moved like a ghost, faster than any ship in the galaxy. The Tar fleet hesitated. They had expected a desperate last stand, not a ship that disappeared from their sensors. Suddenly, 3 enemy warships exploded in quick succession. The Revenant reappeared, its railguns blazing, cutting through the enemy ranks like a knife through paper. Darius piloted with precision, weaving between enemy fire, dodging missiles, striking with deadly accuracy. The Tar fleet panicked. "How is one ship doing this?" An enemy officer shouted. The commander growled. "It's just a ship. Overwhelm it." Hundreds of enemy fighters swarmed toward the Revenant, weapons locked. But the Revenant was not an ordinary warship. Darius activated Shadow Protocol, a stealth mode that made the ship invisible to sensors. The enemy fighters fired blindly, hitting nothing but empty space. Then, one by one, they began to explode. The Revenant reappeared behind them, ripping through their formations, its laser cannons firing with deadly precision. Within seconds, 50 enemy ships were gone. The Zeltar commander's smirk vanished. "Impossible," he whispered. Darius grinned. "Oh, buddy, we're just getting started." But even as the Revenant tore through the enemy ranks, Darius knew the truth. He was just one man against an empire. The Tar had warships, firepower, and numbers beyond count. No matter how advanced the Revenant was, it could only fight for so long. But if he could stall them, if he could keep them busy, maybe, just maybe, the last survivors on Nova Prime could escape. Maybe humanity still had a chance. He gritted his teeth. No turning back. No surrender. With a deep breath, he pushed the Revenant forward, straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. The battle had just begun. The Revenant moved like a ghost, weaving through the battlefield as the Xeltar fleet scrambled to react. The enemy had expected a desperate human resistance, a futile last stand. Instead, they faced something they had never encountered before, a warship that fought like a predator. Darius Kane's hands were steady on the controls, his mind sharp. He had been fighting for years, but never like this. Never alone. But even as he struck down enemy after enemy, he knew the truth. This wasn't a battle he could win. It was a battle to delay the inevitable. A warning flashed across his HUD. Incoming missile swarm. Echo. Evasive maneuvers, Darius ordered. Already ahead of you, the AI responded. The Revenant twisted sharply, its engines flaring blue as it dodged the first wave of missiles. But there were too many. Hundreds of warheads streaked toward them from every angle. Darius activated the gravity pulse drive. A deep hum vibrated through the ship as space around it distorted. The Revenant vanished for a split second, reappearing half a kilometer away, leaving the missiles chasing empty space. They detonated in a violent explosion, shaking the Xeltar formations. Darius exhaled, adrenaline coursing through his veins. That was close. Echo's voice remained eerily calm. We will not survive another volley of that magnitude. Darius smirked. Then we better make sure they don't fire another. His fingers danced over the controls, bringing the Revenant into a sharp dive. They streaked past a massive enemy battleship, its turrets struggling to track them. Darius flipped the ship upside down, fired a full barrage of plasma rounds into the battleship's engines, and pulled up just as it exploded in a bright orange fireball. The enemy fleet was finally realizing the threat they faced. On the Xeltar flagship, Commander Xorvas was livid. His claws dug into the metal armrests of his throne-like chair. How is one ship doing this? He snarled. A nervous officer hesitated before responding. It is moving faster than our scanners can track. It's using technology we have never seen before. Xorvas's red eyes gleamed. Then we changed the strategy. He turned to his weapons officer. Deploy the graviton cage. I want that ship trapped. Darius felt a sudden, unnatural force pulling at the Revenant. He glanced at his instruments. Something was distorting the space around them. Echo, what's happening? Enemy fleet has deployed an artificial gravity field. We are being pulled into their kill zone. Darius gritted his teeth. The Xeltar were adapting. This was bad. He fired the main thrusters, trying to break free, but the force was too strong. The Revenant lurched violently, sparks flying inside the cockpit as alarms blared. Echo, we need options. The AI responded instantly. We can attempt an energy overload to disrupt the gravity field, but it will temporarily disable our primary weapons. Darius didn't hesitate. Do it. The Revenant glowed with a sudden surge of power. Its engines overloaded for a split second, releasing a shockwave that shattered the artificial gravity field. The Xeltar fleet was caught off guard. They had expected to trap the Revenant, not have their own formation thrown into chaos. Darius didn't waste the opportunity. He accelerated straight toward the enemy flagship. Xorvas's eyes widened as the lone warship raced toward him at impossible speed. Fire HFY thing, he roared. The Xeltar fleet unleashed a storm of energy blasts, torpedoes, and railgun rounds. The space between the Revenant and the flagship became a corridor of death and destruction. Darius's heart pounded. He was pushing the Revenant to its limits, dodging, weaving, barely avoiding destruction at every second. One wrong move, and it was over. A railgun round grazed the hull. The ship shook violently. Warning lights flashed. Darius clenched his jaw. Almost there. A final burst of speed. The Revenant broke through the firestorm, charging straight at the Xeltar flagship. Xorvas barely had time to react before the Revenant unleashed its full payload. A direct hit. Explosions ripped through the Xeltar flagship, tearing it apart from the inside. The mighty warship split in two, fire and debris scattering into space. For the first time in history, a single human warship had annihilated an entire enemy command vessel. The remaining Xeltar fleet hesitated. Their leader was dead. Their formations were shattered. For a brief moment, they wavered. Darius saw it. He felt it. The smallest crack in their confidence. And he knew this was his chance. With a smirk, he pushed the Revenant forward. Let's show them what humanity is made of. The battlefield was eerily silent after the destruction of the Xeltar flagship. For the first time in decades, an enemy fleet hesitated in the face of a human warship. One ship, one pilot. And yet, an entire armada stood frozen, unsure of its next move. Darius Kane took a slow breath, scanning his surroundings. The debris of the Xeltar command vessel still burned in the vacuum of space. Its molten remains floating like a graveyard. The Revenant had taken a beating. Scorch marks lined the hull, and warning lights flickered on his dashboard. "Echo, status report," he said, keeping his eyes on the enemy ships. "Primary weapons at 60% efficiency. Shields are regenerating, but structural integrity is compromised. Another direct hit to the port side could result in hull breach." The AI responded. Darius exhaled through his nose. Not great, but he was still breathing. The Xeltar fleet remained motionless for another few seconds, then began to realign their formation. Their hesitation had lasted only a moment. Now they were regrouping, recalibrating their strategy. "They're not running," Darius muttered. "They should be running." The Xeltar are a warrior race. Retreat is not their first instinct, Echo reminded him. Darius cracked his knuckles. "Fine. Then we finish this." He engaged the thrusters, preparing to dive back into battle. But before he could move, an energy surge appeared on the sensors. A massive distortion in space. Something big was coming. Darius's stomach tightened. "Echo, what the hell is that?" "I do not know," the AI admitted, which was never a good sign. Then, without warning, a rift split open in space. A swirling vortex of dark energy erupted in the middle of the battlefield, distorting the light around it. From its depths, a massive warship emerged. Darius's eyes widened. "You've got to be kidding me." The ship was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Twice the size of the Xeltar flagship, covered in black, pulsating armor that seemed almost alive. Its surface shifted like liquid metal, and strange red veins pulsed across its hull. The remaining Xeltar forces immediately bowed their ships in submission. That was when Darius realized this wasn't just another battleship. This was a High Lord's vessel. Echo confirmed his thoughts. Based on energy readings, this warship belongs to Lord Vailrax, Supreme Commander of the Xeltar Dominion. Darius clenched his fists. Of course. The moment the Xeltar saw one of their flagships fall, they must have called for reinforcements. And now he was staring at the worst possible scenario, a direct encounter with the warlord himself. A deep, rumbling voice echoed across the comms, filled with arrogance and amusement. "Human." Darius frowned. "That's Captain Kane to you." A cruel chuckle followed. "I must admit, I did not expect to be summoned here over one ship. But I see now why my warriors struggle." The massive warship's weapons hummed to life, a deep red glow forming along its surface. "Allow me to show you what real power looks like." Darius's instincts screamed at him. "Move. Now." He slammed the controls forward just as a lance of pure energy erupted from the enemy warship. The Revenant barely dodged, the heat from the blast scorching its shields. If that had hit, he would have been vaporized. "Echo, I need ideas." "Running is a suggestion," the AI offered dryly. Darius gritted his teeth. "Not happening." He flipped the Revenant into a roll, twisting between enemy fire. The smaller Xeltar ships joined in the assault, unleashing wave after wave of plasma rounds. Darius weaved through the onslaught, his pulse pounding in his ears. One wrong move, and he was dead. But he had been in tight spots before, and if this was going to be his last fight, he was taking as many of them with him as possible. He pushed the Revenant forward, closing the distance between him and the High Lord's warship. Echo, prepare the Nova Lance. That weapon is still unstable, the AI warned. Darius smirked. So am I. The Revenant's front cannons began to glow. A sphere of concentrated plasma formed at the tip, crackling with energy. It was his most powerful weapon, but also his riskiest. If it backfired, he was dead. Lord Vailrax seemed to sense the incoming attack. His ship's armor shifted, forming a protective barrier of energy. Darius gritted his teeth. Come on, just a little closer. The High Lord sneered. A desperate move, human. Darius exhaled. Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Then he fired. The Nova Lance erupted forward, a blinding beam of energy slicing through space. It collided with the enemy's barrier, and for a moment, everything stood still. Then, boom! The explosion shook the battlefield, sending shockwaves in all directions. Smaller Xeltar ships were flung away like toys. A massive cloud of smoke engulfed the High Lord's warship. Darius waited, his breath shallow. Did it work? The smoke cleared. The warship was still there, damaged but still standing. And now, it was angry. Lord Vailrax's voice returned, this time dripping with rage. You dare? Darius swallowed. Echo. I think I pissed him off. That would be an understatement. The High Lord's warship began to change. Its hull split apart, revealing dozens of smaller attack drones emerging from within. Living weapons. Darius's heart pounded. This wasn't just a battle anymore. This was survival, and he wasn't sure if he could win. Silence. For a moment, there was nothing but the hollow emptiness of space, the shattered remains of fallen ships drifting like ghosts in the void. Darius Kane clenched the controls of the Revenant, his breathing steady but his pulse racing. He had thrown everything he had into that last attack, and the High Lord's warship was still standing. But it wasn't just standing. It was evolving. The hull of the Xeltar dreadnought rippled like liquid metal, the red veins pulsing violently. The very structure of the ship shifted, splitting open in jagged sections to reveal an entire swarm of attack drones hidden within its core. And now, they were awake. Darius muttered under his breath. Echo, tell me I'm hallucinating. The AI's voice remained eerily calm. You are not. The first wave of drones shot forward, a synchronized horde of death, each one moving with unsettling precision. Their sleek black bodies glowed with crimson light as they closed in, faster than any ship Darius had ever encountered. They're biological, Echo observed. Darius blinked. What? These are not standard drones. They are organically fused with nanotech, living weapons. Darius's grip tightened on the throttle. That's disgusting, and highly effective. The first drone reached him. Darius jerked the Revenant into a sharp roll just as the thing opened up, revealing razor-sharp appendages lined with energy. It slashed at him, barely missing the hull, before banking around for another strike. Then another came, and another. Within seconds, the Revenant was surrounded. Red warning lights flashed across the cockpit. His shields were failing. Darius cursed and fired his plasma cannons in a rapid burst, cutting down 3 of the drones, but for every one he destroyed, 10 more appeared. This wasn't a fight anymore. This was a slaughter. Echo, give me a way out. There is no escape route. Then make one. The AI hesitated. Then, with the faintest trace of uncertainty, it said, There is one option, but you won't like it. Darius barely dodged another attack. Try me. You must enter the Xeltar dreadnought. Darius's eyes flickered to the massive warship, into the thing trying to kill me. Yes, the enemy ship is controlling the drones remotely. If you destroy its core, the swarm will deactivate. Darius exhaled sharply. This was insane. Then again, so was fighting an entire armada with one ship. Fine, he muttered. Let's do this. He pushed the Revenant into full throttle, diving straight toward the High Lord's warship. The drones reacted instantly, swarming toward him like a wall of living blades. Darius weaved between them, barely squeezing through gaps in their formation. The Revenant's hull screamed from the stress, the shields flickering with every glancing blow. Then, an opening. A jagged tear in the dreadnought's hull formed from the damage he had already inflicted. It was small, barely big enough for the Revenant to fit through. Darius didn't hesitate. He barreled straight into it. Darkness swallowed him. For a moment, everything was silent again. Only the soft hum of the Revenant's engines as it glided through the ship's interior. The inside of the dreadnought was alive. Veins of glowing red light pulsed through the walls like a heartbeat. The corridors shifted and changed, as if the ship itself was adapting to his presence. It wasn't just a war machine. It was something more. Echo spoke first. "I detect movement ahead." Darius grimaced. "Of course you do." Then the walls split open. Zeltar warriors emerged from the darkness, their bodies encased in biomechanical armor, their glowing weapons trained on him. Darius smirked. "Finally, something I can punch." The first warrior lunged. Darius met him head-on. The Revenant's engines hummed softly, its systems recalibrating after the violent entry. Inside the dreadnought, everything felt wrong, like stepping into the belly of a living beast. The walls throbbed, organic and mechanical all at once, pulsing with eerie red veins that seemed to watch him. Darius Kane gripped the plasma rifle strapped to his back and exhaled slowly. He had fought wars before. He had never fought a ship. "Echo," he muttered, eyes scanning the shifting corridors ahead. "How much time before this thing realizes I'm inside?" The AI's voice crackled over the comms. "Judging by the movement patterns, I'd say it already has." A deep, guttural roar echoed through the warship. Darius froze. That wasn't the sound of machinery. That was something alive. A split second later, the walls began to shift. The smooth metallic surface peeled open, revealing deep gaping crevices. From those crevices, something crawled out. Darius stepped back, gripping his weapon tightly. The creatures were Zeltar, but unlike any he had seen before. Their bodies were a grotesque fusion of flesh and metal, their elongated limbs pulsing with the same red glow that bled through the ship's walls. Their eyes, there were too many of them, and they moved in unnatural ways, scanning him like a machine and a predator at the same time. Then, as if guided by a single unspoken command, they charged. Darius fired. The plasma bolt struck the first Zeltar dead center, but instead of falling, the creature absorbed the energy. "What the?" Darius rolled sideways as another lunged, razor-sharp appendages slicing through the air where he had stood just moments before. He swung his rifle like a club, smashing the butt into the creature's head. The impact sent it staggering back, but it didn't stop. They weren't just soldiers. They were part of the ship, and that meant one thing: they wouldn't stop coming. "Echo, I need options." The AI's voice remained eerily calm. "You need to reach the core. If you can sever the connection, the hive mind controlling these units will collapse." "Yeah. And where exactly is this core?" A sudden tremor shook the dreadnought. The corridors shifted, closing off pathways, trapping him in. "It's moving me," Darius muttered. "It's forcing me somewhere." The realization sent a chill down his spine. The ship was controlling the battlefield. He couldn't let it. Darius ran. The Zeltar abominations pursued, their movements unnervingly synchronized, like a pack of hunters playing with their prey. He vaulted over a twisting metallic structure, fired blindly behind him, and sprinted down a corridor that hadn't closed yet. Every second, the ship adapted, shifting walls, creating obstacles, hurting him toward something. And then he saw it. A massive circular chamber, its ceiling lined with glowing red tendrils that pulsed like arteries. At the center, suspended in a web of shifting metal and organic cables, was the core. A pulsating black sphere, almost breathing. Darius skidded to a stop. He had found it, and it had been waiting for him. A deep voice resonated through the chamber, not through speakers, but directly into his mind. Cold, mechanical, ancient. You do not belong here. Darius gritted his teeth. Yeah? Well, I wasn't exactly invited. The walls trembled. Then the core opened its eyes. 1,000 burning red irises locked onto him, and the chamber came alive. Darius barely had time to react. The moment the core's 1,000 eyes opened, the chamber shifted. The walls expanded, pulsing like a living thing, and the metallic tendrils holding the core unraveled, stretching toward him like serpents ready to strike. A deep, guttural voice whispered into his mind. You were never meant to set foot here, human. Darius tightened his grip on his rifle. Yeah. Well, your kind wasn't meant to burn entire colonies either. Without waiting for a response, he fired. The plasma bolt struck the core, but instead of impact, the energy vanished into its surface, absorbed like water into a black hole. The sphere pulsed in response, its glow intensifying. The ship was feeding off his weapon. Not good. From the walls, Celtar abominations emerged. This time, they were bigger, fused even further with the warship's biomechanical horror. Their bodies were laced with living metal, their limbs reshaped into razor-sharp appendages, and their movements were disturbingly fluid, as if guided by the core itself. Darius ran. He ducked as one of the creatures lunged, its bladed arm missing his head by inches. He spun, flipping a plasma grenade from his belt and hurling it toward the nearest cluster of enemies. The explosion rocked the chamber, sending fragments of organic metal flying. But the ship repaired itself almost instantly. Darius cursed under his breath. Echo, I need options. The AI's voice crackled in his ear. Darius, I'm detecting an energy surge. Whatever you just did, the core is shifting into a defensive state. We need to hit it where it hurts. He glanced at the sphere, pulsing brighter with each passing second. The core wasn't just adapting, it was preparing to attack. Then, without warning, the temperature dropped. Frost spread across the metal floor, and the air itself seemed to hum with unseen energy. The core's red glow intensified, and Darius felt pressure in his skull, like something was trying to crawl inside his mind. It was invading him. His vision blurred. His breath came in ragged gasps. He tried to move, but his limbs felt heavy. Memories flashed before his eyes. Memories that weren't his. A burning planet. A fleet reduced to cinders. An empire collapsing. And then, the Revenant itself, drifting through space, alone, searching for something. Darius clenched his jaw. It was showing him its past. No, he growled, forcing himself to move. You don't get to mess with my head. He reached for his sidearm, flipping open the manual override. If plasma was feeding the ship, then he needed something it couldn't absorb. He pulled the trigger. A kinetic round tore through the air, slamming into the core's surface. This time, the reaction was immediate. The black sphere shuddered, its surface cracking, and the entire chamber screamed. Darius staggered back as the warship convulsed. The XL-TAR creatures let out distorted, inhuman shrieks, their bodies flickering as if their connection to the core was failing. The ship was bleeding. Echo's voice cut through the chaos. That did it. The core's destabilizing. Keep hitting it. Darius fired again. Another impact. Another tremor. The ship's walls ripped apart, exposing the vast void of space beyond. Wind howled through the chamber as the Revenant's atmosphere vented. The XL-TAR were dragged into the blackness, their distorted bodies pulled apart by the vacuum. And then, the core split open. Inside, Darius saw something he didn't expect. A figure, not a machine, not a creature. A human. Suspended in the center of the core, connected by thousands of wires and cables, their eyes glowing with the same eerie red light as the ship itself. Not dead. Not alive. A prisoner. Or something worse. Darius took a shaky step forward. What the hell? The figure's eyes snapped open. And then, in a voice that sent pure dread through his veins, they spoke. "You don't understand what you've done." The warship screamed. Darkness consumed the chamber. Darius stumbled as the entire warship shook violently, its structure groaning under an unseen force. The air felt thick, charged with raw energy, like a storm about to break. The core, or what remained of it, pulsed erratically, its once perfect sphere now fractured, leaking tendrils of crimson light. But Darius wasn't looking at the core anymore. His gaze was locked on the figure inside it. Suspended in the shattered remains of the core, bound by thousands of metallic tendrils, was a human. Their skin was pale, their body unnaturally thin, almost skeletal. Wires and tubes ran along their arms and legs, pulsing in sync with the ship's erratic heartbeat. Their eyes, glowing red like dying embers, locked onto Darius. Then they spoke. "You don't understand what you've done." Their voice was layered, as if multiple voices were speaking at once, human and something else. Darius tightened his grip on his rifle, taking a cautious step forward. "I just put a hole in your ship's heart. I'd say I understand just fine." The figure tilted their head, studying him. "You think you've won?" A chill ran down Darius's spine. The warship shuddered violently, the walls splitting apart. Massive conduits snapped, releasing plumes of glowing blue mist. The ship wasn't just damaged, it was dying. And yet, the figure remained eerily calm. They slowly lifted their hand, and the fractured remains of the core began to reassemble. Darius fired. A kinetic round tore through the air, striking the figure square in the chest. But instead of impact, the bullet stopped. Mid-air, as if caught in an invisible grip. Then, with a flick of their fingers, the bullet reversed direction. Darius barely dodged as it whizzed past his head, embedding itself into the wall behind him. He cursed under his breath. "Not good." Echo's voice crackled in his ear. "Darius, whatever that thing is, it's linked to the ship. Its energy levels are spiking. If we don't end this now." The figure exhaled softly, and the entire chamber exploded with force. Darius was flung backward, slamming into a console. Sparks rained down around him as alarms screamed through the warship. He struggled to get up, but the gravity shifted. A force stronger than anything he had ever felt pinned him in place. Then he heard the whispers. Not from the figure. From the ship itself. It was alive. And it was angry. Darius clenched his jaw. He couldn't move. Couldn't fight back. He had to think. The figure slowly descended from the core, their feet touching the ground for the first time. "You misunderstand," they murmured. "This ship isn't just a weapon. It is a graveyard. A prison." Their red eyes burned brighter. "You have shattered the locks. The war is no longer contained." Darius's blood ran cold. This wasn't about the XL tar. This was bigger. He forced himself to speak. "Who are you?" The figure blinked slowly. "I was like you once. A soldier, a survivor." They glanced around, their expression unreadable. "Until they made me something else." Darius narrowed his eyes. "They?" The figure turned their gaze toward him. "The ones who created this war. The ones who left it behind. The ones who let this ship drift through the void, waiting for someone like you to set it free." The warship screamed again, and suddenly the walls split apart. Beyond them, a fleet. Dozens of massive warships, long dead, now awakening. Darius's heart pounded. They weren't alone anymore. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Darius could barely breathe. The once derelict fleet had awakened. Warships, long thought lost to time, now pulsed with an eerie glow, their dormant weapon systems coming to life. This wasn't just a battle anymore. It was an extinction event waiting to unfold. The figure before him, the ghost in the core, tilted their head, watching his reaction. "You see now," they murmured. "This was never about you, never about your war. The real battle was buried long before your kind ever set foot among the stars." Darius's fingers tightened around his weapon. But deep down, he knew it was useless. He wasn't just facing an enemy. He was facing history itself. Then, Echo's voice crackled in his ear. "Darius, the fleet. I see it." He cut in. His mind raced. There had to be a way out. The warship trembled beneath him as the ghostly figure stepped forward, their red eyes burning like dying stars. "There is no escape," they said softly. Darius clenched his jaw. "Maybe not for me." Then he moved. Fast. With sheer force of will, he threw himself toward the shattered console, fingers flying across the controls. He didn't need to destroy the warship anymore. He needed to take control of it. The figure reacted instantly. Tendrils of energy lashed out, but Darius was already rolling, dodging as sparks exploded around him. Echo's voice screamed in his ear. "Darius, what the hell are you doing?" "Ending this," he growled. His fingers slammed the final command. Manual override. The warship lurched violently. For a second, the figure froze, confused. Darius took his chance. He lunged, grabbing the nearest plasma cutter and thrusting it straight into the core. The ship screamed. The entire chamber erupted into chaos. Alarms blaring, gravity shifting, the walls splitting apart as the core shattered completely. The figure let out a single echoing breath, then vanished in a burst of energy. And with it, so did the fleet. One by one, the awakened warships flickered out of existence, as if they had never been there at all. Darius hit the ground, gasping for air. The silence was deafening. Then, Echo's voice. Soft, disbelieving. "You did it." Darius forced himself to his feet, his vision swimming. He looked around. The warship was collapsing. He stumbled toward the exit, every step a battle, until finally, he was out. The moment he cleared the wreckage, the warship imploded, its once mighty frame vanishing into the void. Darius floated in the silence of space, his suit barely holding together. The stars stretched infinitely around him. Then, a bright light. A ship. His ship. Echo's relieved voice crackled through. "Hang tight, Captain. We're bringing you home." Darius closed his eyes. It was over. Or at least, he hoped it was.